Happy 4th of July from everyone here at 28storms.com, and this is your tropical weather update for the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific. So far, so good in the Atlantic Basin. The National Hurricane Center is not highlighting anything, though in the Eastern Pacific they are keeping an eye on a broad area of low pressure near the Gulf of Tehuantepec, but they only give that area about a 10% chance of development within the next 48 hours, and nothing looks all that impressive on satellite today. We do see some much needed rainfall activity over south central Florida this afternoon. Unfortunately, it is occurring on this 4th of July holiday, but it is relatively isolated and scattered in nature, so hopefully that won't completely dampen your plans for this afternoon and this evening. And some of this increased moisture over southern Florida is in response to this upper level low over the eastern Gulf of Mexico slowly drifting toward the west. As it does so, the low level moisture and surface winds, along with the mid to upper level flow, will continue to become more backed out of the south, thus pumping in more low level moisture from the Caribbean Sea. And that's going to really increase your rainfall just a little bit, nothing too dramatic over the next week. And also we have a surface trough located to the north of Hispaniola, and some of the latest model guidance is indicating that this will also begin to spread a bit more toward the west, once again as that upper level low continues to move west as well. Overall, this is a fairly unfavorable pattern for any tropical organization, though, so we're looking good in terms of any tropical cyclone development. There's really nothing imminent, as many of these upper-level lows remain generally in place, thus creating a lot of westerly wind shear. Again, we have an upper-level low over the Gulf of Mexico, so that's keeping things shut down in terms of any tropical cyclone formation, and we still have a lot of westerly winds over much of the Caribbean and the main development region between the Lesser Antilles and the coast of Africa, although we're beginning to see a bit of a decrease in the low-level wind shear across the far eastern Pacific, although that's really far out to be expecting anything in the first week of July at least, but we'll take a closer look at what may occur down the road within the next 10 days in a moment. And we also have a small pocket of favorable upper-level ridging off the coast of Honduras, but as we saw on satellite imagery, there's really no tropical disturbances imminently moving into that region. So obviously nothing is going to happen within the next 72 hours, but we do see that the upward motion pulse of the Madden-Julian oscillation has strengthened a bit across Central America. We see a bit more upward motion than we have over the past week in this region, and based on some of the model guidance, we expect that MJO pulse to continue to intensify over much of the Atlantic Basin over the next 10 days. The GFS ensemble members continue to push the MJO further into octants 1 and 2, which are typically very favorable for Atlantic development, especially once they get deeper into these octants. We're now taking a look at the empirical wave propagation. You can see that upward motion pulse beginning over Central America around the current time frame, and over the next 10 to 15 days it will gradually spread more into the deep tropical Atlantic. You can't see it quite as good on this graphic, but if you look at the latest GFS, it really begins to spread more into the deep tropical Atlantic closer to the coast of Africa by the middle half of July. The same can also be seen on the latest CFS model forecast. This particular model is picking up on the current MJO pulse even better, and once again, by the middle part of July, it's well entrenched into the deep tropical Atlantic. So today's satellite is quiet, but I fully suspect that by around July 10th through the 15th, we could easily be looking out here for potential development, but we'll just have to wait and see. The latest Canadian model from today shows that it still wants to develop a weak tropical storm in the western Atlantic, but that looks fairly suspect as nothing is organized at this time, and it appears that upper-level conditions will remain unfavorable for the next week. It's also still continuing to indicate the potential for development near the coast of Mexico, but it's significantly backed off compared to its aggressive run yesterday afternoon, which indicated we could see a strong tropical storm or perhaps even a hurricane out there by the end of the forecast period. The latest GFS continues to indicate a much more realistic scenario with no development occurring in the western Atlantic, along with keeping much of the basin quiet for the foreseeable future, and it's also much more pessimistic in terms of any type of eastern Pacific development over the coming days. The latest European shows a fairly quiet pattern throughout the rest of the period as well, much like the GFS. This is day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Still nothing very apparent here in the deep tropical Atlantic. If anything, we still have a broad monsoon low over here to the south of Central America, but otherwise a very quiet pattern. So that is your tropical weather update for this 4th of July. We will have more extensive analysis of the tropics throughout the remainder of this week, and I fully suspect that perhaps the models will become a bit more interesting toward the middle and latter half of the week as that MJL pulse really begins to intensify. But once again, we'll just have to wait and see. But thanks again for checking out 28storms.com and check by again soon.